Jess, whenever you're ready, it's 6 o'clock now, so. Hi, Tara.
Good evening.
Ah, there she is. Wow, that says it loud enough. You good? Okay, I'd like to call the Alternative Housing Committee meeting to order on July 25th, 6 p.m. Any changes to the agenda?
Nope, but I just wanted to let you know, John went home sick, so he won't be here tonight. And I believe Frank Rich is also on this committee and
Yes,
I
Frank is.
hadn't heard from him, so I'm unsure if he will be here tonight.
Okay, well, hearing no changes, I'll accept the agenda as presented. We'll start off with a discussion draft on short-term rental zoning ordinance. And I imagine Tara is going to swing right into action on that.
Sure, and I imagine you all have the latest draft in front of you, and I'm gonna put it on the screen so in part so I can follow along. Let's find the right one. So sections 1 and 2, you were pretty good with after the last meeting. Did anybody have anything additional to talk about on the first page?
Yes, I have a question. On the previous meeting, we had a sort of a chart here that had types of rentals in the various districts. And I noticed that between that one and the last one that I received, there's a difference here, short-term rental. They previously had no under residential. Now it's a yes under residential.
Yeah,
Somehow I missed that.
we talked about it at one point. I don't remember when it got changed.
Yeah. Last meeting, yeah.
Yeah, Tara was thinking that legally it might not be permissible to segregate one. Is that right?
I can't give legal advice, of course, but I think it would be tough to enforce and rationalize, to make a good case for not allowing it in one district versus the rest of the town. Because I think your argument was noise, impact on the neighbors, parking and all, but that would all be dealt with through the regulations. So I'm not sure what argument you'd make to the owners of those properties of why they couldn't do it. So was it not supposed to be changed? I actually thought it was changed a couple meetings ago. Not at the last one, but the one before.
No, we had changed it to a yes in residential.
Right, I don't think that's a change between meetings, though. I don't think there are any changes to this table between meetings. We made changes at the meeting, but I haven't made changes to it since the meeting.
On the ones up above, I'm assuming N is for no. E is for special exceptions.
I would agree with you there, Raj.
I think I followed what you have in your ordinance now,
Well, I just want to make sure, but down here, if everything has to be yes, because the prejudice is against the
I
zone.
think some of you might not have your microphones down where I can, where I can hear you.
If on short-term rental, everything has to be yes, because it might be prejudiced to a zone, why are the up above ones not prejudiced against the zone? You've got no and special exception on other ones.
Yeah, I wasn't asked to address those. I'm only here to talk with you about short.
Not those, because those were already there. Those were already in the black. They were already part of the zoning ordinance already.
They were in play.
Yeah, we're not, that's just what you have in your zoning.
That's
right
what we already
now.
have. That's why I think that stayed like that.
Okay, and this one here is being added, so we're,
These are new.
Right.
The blue is
Anything in
new.
the blue.
Yep, is new.
okay. Okay.
Good question.
Well, just that, I mean, if in the existing, you can say no, why can't you say existing, no in the new?
Well, an argument for that, just looking at it, and of course, I didn't write those, might be that the residential district is a little bit more densely developed and it is all residential. And those first two uses are lodging uses. They're more like living next to a little motel as opposed to a short-term rental is something someone's doing with their home. Similarly, hotels and motels aren't allowed there.
Right, so what you're saying, Tara, is basically bed and breakfast, lodging, house, and hotel, motel are businesses that wouldn't be in a residential area anyway, right?
Right, I mean, this committee's approach to short-term rentals up till now has been that it's more of a residential use than business use, so it should be allowed in everybody's home. That's the philosophy that's been driving what we've been doing. So is the consensus we're good with this as shown?
Okay, I guess we'll
Yeah.
ask. Who's in
Yeah,
favor?
Yeah, I'm good with it. Yeah.
I think so.
Just a little straw poll here, yes?
Yeah.
Yes, Raj?
Yeah.
Yep, yes, we are in agreement with that, Tara.
So I just got a severe thunderstorm watch, but it's all sunny and blue sky out there, so I don't think you're gonna lose me, but.
Well, don't send it to us.
Okay, so the second page, I don't think that had any changes between meetings either. I think we made some at the meeting, but not since. I see is I didn't underline short-term rental and transit. So everybody's still good with those or?
I believe so.
Mhm.
All right, so then the first changes that I made since I've seen you were in section 3, the top of page 3. I re-looked at this list a little bit because if it's gonna be a permitted use, and then we need to make sure that the person issuing the permit doesn't have to make any judgments, because judgments need to be made by committees. They need to be made by the zoning board or the planning board. Anything that's just the code official saying yes, yes, yes to checking off the boxes is what we want to have in here. So I don't think I added any new criteria, but I tweaked them a little bit so that I think it might have said, for example, before, like adequate off-street parking, but instead I looked up and your requirement is 2 parking spaces per dwelling. So there's something the zoning officer can say, yep, yes, there's 2. Yes, it's a town or state maintained road. Here's the DES permit, things that the property owner can turn in to the code official and do have the building inspector go out and make sure that it meets the life safety code. So these are all things that it's a check off the box rather than a judgment.
Question on number 4, the well water testing quality. Do we want to include specifications? What kind of tests are we looking at here?
It would be just, I would imagine, just coliform
Okay.
bacteria.
Should we specify that or?
I would think it'd be a good, Tara, did you?
Drinking water standards.
Yeah, I guess I would assume that we were talking about drinking water standards.
State.
I think the state is coliform.
Well, that, I don't know the answer. That's why I asked the
Well,
question.
there's others, there's arsenic.
Yeah,
Arsenic
There's
is
arsenic, there's
there's-
also
and all of
radon.
them, and all of them can be in the water. There's allowable
there's limits.
limits.
The thing about it is,
They won't make you put a filter in if you have.
well, I'm just gonna go to when we build a house and we have to get a water test, to get our occupancy permit, all they test for is coliform bacteria. Now, we test for more than that, but the permits can go through if they have other,
Follow the state standard.
Other things might be recommended.
yeah, that's, yeah.
State.
Yeah.
Well,
Why don't
The thing
I-
about it is if you had an elevated coliform bacteria, I mean, or I say
July.
E. coli, well, no, not if we have arsenic, you know, there's ways to treat that. And I don't think the state's going to shut your well down for that. You know, now, if you were a cabin colony and it had water distribution, it falls under a different set of criteria. But on a single family residence, like an apartment, you know, you could have arsenic,
Up to 10.
right? But the thing about it is John's not going to stop giving you a CO if you have an arsenic level greater than 10. That's my point.
What I was trying to get to is, Tyra had alluded to earlier, let's make this simple, a check mark. Do you have it? Yes or no? And I thought this was a little bit vague. I don't know if there's any.
Yeah, so I could see making it more specific to be for E. coli.
We should probably get input from John on that.
Yes.
That would be the best way to.
So what you're talking about, is that town standards or state standards?
Well, I imagine John would echo the state standards. You know?
Which he does.
All right.
Yeah.
Which he does. That's why I said you go by the.
You know, you can have a whole bunch of iron in there. Nobody's gonna
iron,
want the
sand.
well, but it's not gonna hurt you.
No.
You know, I think there's a good argument for having it be E. coli in that these are not people who are going to be living in this dwelling. They're people we want to make sure don't get sick by staying there for a week.
Right.
So I think that could be an argument for E. coli, but we could run that by,
Jess, why don't we just get John's input
Yep.
on that and we'll just move on.
I'm curious on number 2, the dwelling is served by 2 off-street parking spaces. Technically, I'm a farm of 200 acres and I have no road frontage, but you could park 100 cars at my farm. So technically I wouldn't pass under.
Well, yes, you would,
would.
because
Yeah.
this is a minimum criteria. 2 is minimum. You
Okay.
can have more spaces if you wish.
That's
It
right.
says served by 2 off-street. parking.
Off-street.
Off-street
Okay.
parking.
Off-street
You're all
parking.
set.
So you. So you
We're
don't have
moving
to-
on. We're moving on.
all right,
Not on.
Now you get it.
yeah, the concern there is, people don't want a bunch of cars showing up that don't know where parking is allowed on the street, where it's not, or blocking their view from their driveways.
You know,
Anything else on section 3?
on number 3, I think, I don't know, and I'd again refer to this to John again. If we don't want any pre-1972 septic systems to be operating on a rental situation, so should we have to say a current septic system up to today's standards? Because there's a lot of 55-gallon drums still kicking around,
That's nuts.
and we don't want to be unnecessarily using those.
It says
Permitted.
current,
Permitted, yeah.
well, it says current.
Yeah, well, the thing,
Is
I
that
think,
legit or?
Would it,
well, go ahead.
would it be a difference of whether or not it is a system that has been failed in the past or failed? Or if this looks like it is failing? I mean, I think there'd be a problem.
Well, I think we should do what we do in every other case, is you have to have a design. You don't have to install it, but you have to have an
Approved design.
up-to-date approved design.
State approved design.
But
Well, that is the DES requirement. though.
Yep.
that's what we've done in other cases. That's what you do if you've got a system that's working and you go for a building permit and it's over, your system's over 20 years, that's what you have to do.
What if let's change it from design requirements to regulations, because what you're describing is what DES requires.
Yes.
But I mean, I think one of the ideas here is that you don't want somebody with a 55-gallon drum using it as a short-term rental, because all of a sudden, maybe that family's only been there a few long weekends a year and that works. But if it goes on Airbnb and it's available the whole season, that's a problem.
Well, If it's working, it's working. You
That's
know,
right.
You got two bedrooms, doesn't make any difference.
Time a waterfront property is sold, they have to have a site assessment done by septic. design,
Yes.
which
To be
proves
sold, but not to go on Airbnb.
no septic system.
Yeah, but it ends right there.
Hey, Paul.
No, nobody,
Did you?
that has to go to, that inspection that has to be done has to go to the buyer. Nobody else. It doesn't go to the
But
town,
those
it
are-
doesn't go to the state.
But you can request it.
Yeah, the Board of Selectmen before permitting can request a site assessment. They could do that.
Yes.
We're not talking about properties that are being sold, though. We're talking about properties that are being advertised on services like Airbnb.
But technically,
Or
if they've either got a system that's updated or they don't. So if they don't have one that's updated, you get them, they have to have a design that can be implemented. And if their system is working, then they work it. If it
That's right.
fails,
That's what I was
they
saying.
replace it. Doesn't make any difference whether it's short-term rental or people live this, it's people living there.
Septage is
Every day.
septage.
So just because
It
it's
does not
short-term,
discriminate.
it doesn't-
That's right. That doesn't change. That doesn't change.
Doesn't change. It's still being used. So as long as it's working, it's working.
Right.
Therefore, a site assessment would be the appropriate thing to do because the site assessment establishes whether it's working.
Well,
We'll
that's,
see a problem. I mean, you can
Site assessment is,
visibly see the problem if there is.
so now you're talking a fee because you're gonna have to have John go out and do this.
yeah, because
the
He doesn't
site,
do the site assessment. No,
Who's doing
no.
the site assessment?
Septic designer.
Septic designer, yeah.
the site assessment law is only applicable to sale.
Septic designer.
$500 to do the site
Septic
assessment.
designer isn't necessarily gonna be able to do it. You'd have to get like a home inspector.
I don't think, I
Septic
did-
designer's gonna design a new system.
Well, when
Can
you,
can we just let
when you sell a
Tara
home,
talk for a second?
We'll be,
well, I think you're getting down an onerous path here, right? But and the site assessment law is only about sales, not change of use, not changing it to short-term rental.
right, but the site assessment could be used in a different manner than for a sale.
But then
Yeah,
again,
I think, well,
No,
my,
no, it would be good for a period of time, I'm
if
sure.
I may, can it be assessed by a septic company to come in and do a visual with a camera?
That's what.
no, that's really,
And
that's
have
really,
them come in, and payable by the homeowner to
That's-
have the person come out, do a home, an inspection of the tank and a septic system with a scope and assess it that way and give them a report.
For a short-term rental permit?
that's really expensive.
But that's the only way you're gonna get an assessment.
That's the only way you'll get a good assessment. If not,
Otherwise, it's, potluck. I mean, septic
But
designer is,
I don't think the way it's written is looking for something that extreme. Just that it hasn't failed and
well, that's why I said, all you need is a septic design. If it's working,
That's more expensive than a site assessment.
yeah, it is. It's a gray area because people are using it now.
Right,
The house is lived in 365 days a year, whether it's the homeowner or 12 weeks of having someone there in their placement. It's not overloading it any more than when they're there.
yeah, the way to implement this would be either, so you're saying it's probably functioning, so it's not failed. Signs for the number of rooms to be utilized as bedrooms, they either have a permit that shows it was designed for that, or if it's an old, we don't even know where it is, then they would have to hire a septic designer to come and document that and provide a letter, however they decide to do it. And I've certainly done that for site plans in the past. Something like an inn, that bed and breakfast that's going to expand. That's done all the time for old systems.
Mhm.
So I didn't think this was as onerous necessarily as some of you are trying to bring it. Trying to make it easy for the homeowner, but prevent. I don't agree with the argument that we don't have more gallons of sewage in this building because it's short-term rental. I think a lot of short-term rentals are filling the gaps between family use of seasonal homes.
So what if there was a question that said, is there a septic plan on file with the state at your home? And does your home meet or exceed the room limits available on the septic plan with the state? It'd be a question, a yes or no. Because I'm sure there's some homeowners that have, maybe they bought the house and the house is so old that some previous resident 30 years ago did their own septic and it's not on file with the state and they have no idea what it is or how old it is. But then there are those that have redone their septic systems and they're on file and
Right, and that's what I was saying. They either have a permit or they really have no idea what's going on with the system, and then maybe they need to hire a septic designer to come have a look.
The septic plan on anything after 1972 is a copy of it is here in this building as well.
it was my understanding that a homeowner could do their own septic system.
They still can.
Yes.
But you just can't be willy-nilly. You have to have an approved plan to go by.
Okay.
And if there isn't a permit or plan that can be found, it's the septic designer that comes out to the property and writes that it's consistent with the current sizing regulations or not.
I don't think a designer tells you what's in the ground.
Right.
They design
Hmm.
what's to go in the ground. But they don't know where, there's no plan. They can't just come out and say, well, yeah, there's the field there and there's.
Well, they generally do some investigation. I mean, I have dealt with site plans that were older buildings that had to do that, so. And if there is no evidence at all, maybe that's a case where they do need to file a new design in case it fails. But we don't need those details if we just say consistent with DES regulations.
I think one of our biggest concerns is, was there a home that was built that was a 3-bedroom home and they have a 3-bedroom septic system, but then later they redid their basement and added a room and now they're short-term renting it and the septic system never got properly upgraded.
And another way to track that is the tax card that they have in the assessor's office. That'll tell you how many bedrooms there are, what they're being charged. And when whomever goes out to do this inspection to compliance will say, okay, you have 2-bedroom septic system. Oh gosh, you got 6 bedrooms here, That's where we'll hit that.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also a lot of people advertising short-term rentals that are saying more beds than you'd see on your tax card because they're counting a pull-out sofa or throw cushions that they've put in the living room or a den or whatnot. So that's why I used the wording that I did, that it's the number of rooms to be utilized as bedrooms.
Well, the idea is great. We have to protect the water and make sure the septic's not an issue, but how are we going to implement this in a reasonable fashion? That's our challenge, right? I mean, we can't have, I say we can't have septic designer, big bucks, very time consuming. How are you going to enforce that? I think it's going to be very challenging.
Or like I said, if it's approved, to ask John about it first and then having a septic company go out and do an examination of the tank and see if the tank.
And field. What they'll do
On
is
the
they'll
field.
dig a hole, post hole digger right down in the field. And if it's full of water,
Right.
then it's not
exactly.
working right.
They also can go in with cameras.
Yep.
They can go in with the cameras. They can actually see the size of the septic system. They can see through the piping of the septic system to see if there's anything growing through the septic system, if it's failing, if it's crushed. They can check the tank physically, visibly see the tank, and they can write a report on it. To me, that would be what we're looking for. Is this a failed system or is it still a current good system adequate for the size of the building and the bedrooms?
You get the tax card. And if you need to, you can find the septic design here in this building. By the time you put all that together, you should be able to make a determination of if they're within the realm of what they say they have.
So for the older properties, they're out of luck.
Then I would revert back to what Raj said, get a design and put it on the shelf. If it fails, then you can do it.
Do that because now most of these waterfront lots, you're only going to get a 2-bedroom septic system. Not going to get anything more unless you go with
Clean Solutions,
yep.
Clean solution. Yeah.
then hang on to your pocketbook on that.
Is what you're saying, what you're proposing, is that done when a house is sold?
A site assessment.
The site assessment,
Waterfront
yes.
lot.
Less detailed.
It's less detailed.
It is.
Yeah.
The site assessment looks at whether or not could legally put a septic system on the lot today, really. It's a disclosure to the potential buyer of whether it's legal. And that's how I describe it.
I'm not talking about actually a site assessment. I'm talking about just looking into the septic system that's currently being used, whether it's meets standards or not. And then they take it from there.
Well,
If they
listen,
want to pursue it.
on a
and go
3-bedroom house, if
further,
they have a 1250 tank, you know, it's probably up to snuff. Because a 3-bedroom house not that long ago was a 1,000-gallon tank. So,
What if we run, since John's your code official, right?
right.
So why don't we run all of this wording by him and ask him if he would, if this was on an application form like this, would he know what to do
I
with it?
think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, but that's basically what we said before.
Yeah,
It is thrown in his lap, but he could.
but that's up in his alley.
Yeah, I mean, if he's the one who's gonna have to implement it, then
Yes.
let's run all of that by him, not just the E. coli, but
Okay.
all of the language is the next step.
Okay, public water supply, building health and safety codes. That would be done upon the inspection of when they get the permit.
Right.
You'll get life safety and things of that nature. Anything else on section 3?
No.
Section 4.
So section 4, this is something I added. We talked about a couple other places that you talked about that you didn't want the accessory dwelling unit to be utilized as a short-term rental. The home with an accessory dwelling can be, but not the accessory dwelling unit. I probably should have the word unit in here. And I just kind of took a look through the ordinance to see where else we might want to, where else that could possibly come up. And I thought bunkhouse may be another place. You want to be clear that that can't be a short-term rental.
So what you're saying, I think you're proposing that you can't do a short-term rental for the bunkhouse itself, but you can do a short-term rental for a property that has a bunkhouse, correct?
Right, you have a whole section in your ordinance about bunkhouses, so it would, this language would fit into that existing
That's
section.
freestanding and has not got plumbing in it.
You Just,
Right,
Place
I would
people to
agree
sleep.
with both of those, the accessory dwelling unit and the
People to sleep in.
bunkhouse to not be
Bunkhouse.
used as short-term rental.
Solely, but if the bunkhouse was in conjunction with a property that it was
The house.
solely used for this
Yeah.
short-term rental, the whole property could be used. But septic loading, see, a lot of times people get away without counting these bunkhouses as septic loading. And well, they don't have any plumbing in them, but people still gotta go pee.
What if they had an outhouse?
A portable John?
Yeah.
You can't have that on a site with a functional septic system, I thought, or
You-
non-functional
you-
system.
Yeah, I don't dare say anything on that.
John, you can have that on any.
Well, you can have it, you can bring them in for, like, let's say you have a wedding at your house. So you want to do that because you don't want to beat up your septic system. So that's how that would be used. But construction, it's a rule in the
Yeah,
town
you
that
have
we
to
have
have
one
it.
on site. So. Either that or a really big tree.
And are we saying here in number 4 that what is it? An accessory dwelling is not allowed to have a short-term rental? I thought we said that we could do that.
So, like the main house could
You
be.
said the house that has an accessory dwelling unit can be one, but not the accessory dwelling unit itself, because.
I thought we had rediscussed that and decided it would be okay.
I
but
kind of thought we did too.
Yeah,
I thought we
and-
touched on that.
We did.
And
Conflicts
we
with
went
elsewhere.
back to
Okay.
what this is written because the accessory dwelling unit that was put in place to help offset the lack of, availability for housing.
Right.
So it
Because if you
wasn't
go
put
and
in
read the
place
definition,
for a short-term rental.
if you read the definition of a auxiliary unit, it doesn't state that you can't as it currently stands.
Well, that's why this is a number 15 at the end of the existing list.
Right. I'd be curious to re-ask John about that.
Right, so it might not specify it in our regulation or in our definition, it's in the RSA.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
So they're
So
not
it's
consistent.
Right,
So one of them has to be changed.
Well, we kind of got to follow the RSA, I'd say. That'd be my guess.
Generally, yes. Get in less
because our
trouble that way.
definition
That's right.
doesn't talk about, short-term rentals because it wasn't a
Yeah.
thing at the
It wasn't
time.
a-
Yeah,
So that's why it doesn't
Follow the
specify.
RSA, but as a minimum, but you can make it more restrictive per town.
Right.
correct. Yeah, that's a minimum guideline that the state is.
I mean, I initially had, I think the first draft had said that it could be a short-term rental, but the consensus was to change it so that it couldn't be, as Jessica said, so that an accessory dwelling unit is serving the purpose of adding to housing for residents.
I don't remember it being the consistent vote last time we talked about it.
Well, talk about it again.
John's not here, so it's a hard, it's a stop point.
Why, I'm not sure what is his perspective that's gonna guide this one.
Well, if the RSA says no go, it's a no go, right? And we have no authority over the RSA.
Right, so it elaborates more in section 319 in the zoning ordinance, so it's just really refers to, it being a housing unit and available, more available for the housing stock of the town.
Yeah, I think, I don't think it's specified in the RC, but it's certainly not the intention, and it's certainly not the language, as Jessica's describing it would be inconsistent with your accessory dwelling section to allow it as a short-term rental. It's not why you have it.
Right.
So it doesn't specifically say that you can't do it, but you're leaning towards it's not meant or worded in such a way to allow
Want to
it.
read this that's just a small little few sentences.
Sure.
Go right ahead.
All right, so this is directly from section 319. And it says, the purpose and intent of allowing accessory dwelling units is to provide the opportunity or encouragement for the development of small rental housing units. These units will help improve Alton's inventory of affordable housing without significantly altering the rural one-family residential character of the community. Furthermore, it is the purpose and intent of this provision to allow more efficient use of the town's existing housing stock and to provide economic support for present resident families of limited income. That was the purpose of the
Right.
accessory dwelling unit. Doesn't exclude, obviously, short-term rental, because we weren't talking about that then.
What the effect of this, though, thinking about it, like you say, don't you say the owner has to live in one of the units?
Right.
So if they wanted to have a short-term rental, they'd need to live in their accessory dwelling unit.
I think that's what we came to at the last meeting.
Yeah, I have it in
The
my
owner
notes.
could live in the accessory unit, then rent out the house
Correct.
on a short.
But they can't do the opposite if you have this.
Yeah, that was what we talked about last time. Yeah.
I mean, I still actually just don't see the bias towards being against a short-term rental, because if you had a lot of auxiliary units that were short-term rentals, it would still create a business situation where short-term rentals would be cheaper the more you have, and there would still be, places, you're still renting it. So by definition, it's still a local rental.
Well,
I just don't see how it doesn't allow it.
I mean, right now, we happen to be talking about short-term rentals, but as a board, I think we're called the Alternative Housing Committee. We need to have more stock for full-time people to be able to live in.
Right.
And I don't think most people can afford a short-term rental rate to live in full-time, right?
Agree with that.
Yeah, definitely not.
But I think, I mean, just one thing you want to make sure you're considering is your zoning ordinance already says that the owner of the property has to live in one of the units. Is there a reason that you're making them live in the accessory dwelling unit rather than the main house?
Well, you've lived in the main house all your life. Here's your furniture, everything's here. Now, all of a sudden, you decided you need to make a little bit of money because the tax rate's going up and you can't afford it. So you're gonna squeeze into the accessory unit so you can rent the house? No, you're just gonna rent the accessory thing. Now, what
Yeah,
you're saying is, we're the Alternative Housing Committee, we're supposed to be making more rentals. Well, that's kind of like down the line a little further. Right now, we're still trying to solve the short-term rental thing there's a problem with it. And that's what we're trying to solve. And that's, all the little, the too many people, the parties, the
Right.
noise. And so as far as that, I mean, kind of lost pace there a little bit, but yeah, making more places is down the road further. Right now, we're just dealing with the short term. So I don't see why you couldn't do short term on the accessory building.
I don't see it, but then you.
Yeah, that's how I had it initially, because of the.
It doesn't say you
equity
can't do it.
The RSA says you can't do it.
No, the RSA is silent.
doesn't say that.
because-
Does not say
Okay.
that.
No,
What does the RSA say?
we didn't have the term short-term rental yet when it was written.
So it doesn't say it then.
Right.
So I know from my own situation why this is a little frustrating is I have an auxiliary unit, and my parents that live in California come and visit us and their grandkids twice a year, and they stay in the auxiliary unit. But of course, when they're not there, I rent it. But if I had to rent it with a 12-month lease, my parents don't have a place to visit anymore. And that sucks.
Mhm.
So it doesn't make sense.
So is the consensus to take this back out?
So that's just me.
I
That's just
would
my
say it,
thought.
and it's your the Q-tips that go to Florida there. I mean, they want to rent their places as well.
Q-tips?
I can't-
Snowbirds?
Snowbirds. I couldn't come up with snowbirds.
Must be the white-haired people.
So there's definitely pros and cons to it. Which way are you leaning as a board here, as a committee?
I think we're leaning, if I may say,
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
allowing the short-term rental in the accessory dwelling.
I agree.
I think that's where we're going.
Mr. Bober, what's your thought?
I don't know enough about it to really express myself.
Okay, Bill?
Well, we talked about it, not last meeting, the meeting before, and I just have some notes here that we talked about it becoming a problem we have a problem with low-income housing here already. And that by making that a short-term rental, it'd become a bigger problem because it would take away lower-income housing, which we're already short of, so.
Well, then we need to address what the other committee's looking for to get rid of the zone where rural residential, where you can have rental units.
That's part of this committee as well. So it's two problems.
That's the master plan committee that's looking at
They
that.
can coexist.
Excuse me. Okay, so Bill, what was you, are you for it or against it?
I'm not for it. I
Okay.
think
Antron?
I'm for it.
Raj?
I'd be
Accessory,
Yeah.
using it.
for the accessory.
Paul, you said that, sir?
I'd say no,
No?
no.
Paul?
Yes.
So,
Yes, is that it?
two
Yeses.
4 yeses. We're in the affirmative to use it. Mr. Bober didn't want to vote, so.
To delete this,
To allow short-term rentals in an accessory dwelling.
yeah, so we'll delete that.
Yep.
And then, do we need to say any more about the bunkhouse?
Would we like to create an amendment that says that we are allowing it so that in the future it's not a confusion?
No, I will make sure that the language is clear.
Okay.
We can do that right now. So right now, we've defined short-term rental, a single-family dwelling with or without an accessory dwelling unit. So does that make it clear or no?
Occupied, where is she?
I have a question on this. If you allow short-term rentals in the accessory building, does that also allow short-term rentals for the main building?
We already do.
The main building already has that right.
So
I'll just put a note into, you don't have a thought now, I'll just put it in to look at.
So is your question that two of them can be short-term rented at the same time? Is that what you're gonna ask?
Right.
so
And
no owner present.
so no, because accessory dwelling units need to either contain the homeowner either in the accessory dwelling unit
Someplace on the
or in the
property.
main.
So the
Or in the
homeowner
main-
has.
Well, yes and no. I mean, you don't say they have to be present. You say it has to be their residence. So they could be in Florida for the winter.
That's correct. You need a manager. Every property needs a manager.
Yeah.
That's, that element would be dealt with in the select board regulations.
Or
You
they're
would-
taking the
You
risk,
would ask for an emergency contact.
or they're taking a risk in not being there, that if something was to escalate and there was to be a complaint, that would then go against their permit and
That's
they
right.
could get in trouble.
Right. I mean, that's the whole point of having select board regulations that complement the zoning.
That was one of the requirements that we talked about, that if there was a absentee short-term rental, that someone had to be the designated manager within so many miles
To
to be able
respond.
to be able to mitigate any issues or problems or take care of anything.
Yeah, and I have that down as, I mean, we have kind of a ticker list in number 6 of things that you're gonna suggest to the select board they have in their regulations, and one of those is a local contact.
Mhm.
So let's go back to bunkhouses. We could. Is this, so you guys had a lot of good questions there of what, if there, can you count it as a bedroom, and really only if it's part of the septic system design, right? Is this language I have not enough?
I am curious. I've just never heard the term bunkhouse before, but to muddy the waters even more, there's a whole nother rental committee, or not committee, but subject of like a glamping campsite, like a glamorous campsite. You know, it could be a platform with like a canvas on it. It could be a yurt. All those things don't have a bathroom necessarily, or sometimes they'll even have a composting toilet in the unit. So again, it's just totally different.
Yeah, we're not talking about those. That under state law is a campground.
Okay, so somebody had a bunkhouse.
We're talking about single family homes only.
Okay, so what if a single family home had a campground on the premises?
Then it better comply with the zoning and the state law.
Okay,
And I am aware that there are some companies pushing people to do this without permits.
A lot of places on the water or camps used to have a main cottage and then bunkhouses
Mhm.
that you'd go and just sleep in, but they weren't, the bathrooms were either separate or they were outhouse or there was a bathhouse, but they weren't part, but it's all part of the same property.
Yeah.
Right?
You have a whole
It's more of a
page.
campground operation than a cabin colony, if you want to call it
Yeah.
as such. Cabin colonies traditionally have their own facilities within.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about,
I understand that, but I was just making a reference.
yeah, but it sounds like not everybody's aware of it though, that you have a whole section in your zoning ordinance called bunkhouse regulations. And it's something
And
that's
just put those in
accessory,
back fairly recently, the
it's
bunkhouse. right?
accessory to a residential use, and it can't have a bathroom. So I just assumed it can't be a short-term rental either.
Again, if the house was part of the thing and the bunkhouse was part of the package to rent, then you could store people in the bunkhouse because they have access to the main house.
That makes
Same
sense.
property.
Yeah, same property.
Same.
So would it clarify enough if we said as a separate short-term rental property?
Yeah, you cannot have it separate from the main house as a rental. That's what we're saying?
Well, you certainly couldn't do that.
Yeah,
Has no-
separate short-term
Right.
rental
It
property.
has no facilities.
And it's not allowed to have facilities.
So if we say a bunkhouse may not be utilized as a separate short-term rental property, then we're hanging our hat on this, if it counted as a bedroom in the septic design, then you're good.
Isn't it?
We don't need to restate that. That should fix that. So number 5, I just kind of circle back to my notes to talk about, make sure that, well, let me start that sentence over. What the guidance from NHMA lawyers is on short-term rentals is to make sure all your definitions are clear of what's residence, what's lodging, and where does short-term rental lie. So I had some notes hanging out there on that, from that review. And I just wanted to make these other recommendations that I think could be part of this same amendment. I looked at hotel, motel, and just inconsistent, right? You say transient lodging accommodations or hotel, but you say sleeping accommodations or transient use in motel. So this is just trying to make those match.
I could understand this. I read hotel and I read what a hotel was. I said, yeah, that makes sense. Then I read motel and I read what a motel was. I said, yeah, that makes sense. Then I get down here to dwelling unit and I just can't follow that.
All right, so we're in a different thought now. Hold it, that's good. And I'm gonna leap right on to the next section then. So I noticed in dwelling unit, you have a conflict because you say, what you have now is in the black. I don't know if do you have color copies?
No.
Everything's in
Yep,
black.
Yep.
Everything.
All right, so what you have now on the dwelling unit is not underlined or crossed out. Right now, if you just look at dwelling unit, the new text I'm recommending is underlined. And I'm recommending that you get rid of that definition that says dwelling unit, continuing care, retirement community. It's just a conflict I noticed when I was looking at your definition of dwelling unit, because in dwelling unit, you say,
You can look at what she has highlighted in blue she wants to remove.
no, the blue is adding.
But Roger, that's the last line, last sentence on that. Number 5,
On page 3.
very last sentence.
Can't see that, Roger.
Continuing care retirement community main.
A dwelling, starts with a dwelling unit, the very last.
So I'm trying to add that sentence and get rid of the separate definition for continuing care retirement community dwelling unit that's on the top of page 4. Because I think if you read those, you can see the conflict.
They have cooking. Oh, okay, all right.
May or may not have cooking facilities.
Right, but you already said to be a dwelling unit, it has to have cooking facilities. So you can get rid of that conflict by just bringing that sentence up and get rid of the separate definition.
Now, that's a rule. We can change that here, Jess, or
We're
is
not changing anything. We're getting rid of the definition that.
well,
reads-
that's a change, getting rid of it, Tara.
No, we're not changing anything. Because right now, your definition of continuing care retirement community dwelling unit says with or without kitchen facilities. We're not changing that.
Okay, well, I thought you said what you have underlined here in blue, you wanted to remove.
No, that's being added.
Added.
Okay,
It's not here.
that's right. So I guess she wants to add it now. Or it's not,
Already here.
it's
It's on
because,
here, she's already added it.
Already added it.
It's already added. And you want to leave it to say may or may not have cooking facilities. correct?
I'm not trying to change your rules. I'm just trying to make your definitions read properly.
I think the
So that
challenge,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the challenge is what we see on the screen with the blue and the underline is not what we have in our hard copies in front of our,
Right.
in our hands, and some folks can't read the screen. I think that's part of the confusion.
Well, it's here, but it's not underlined and in blue.
Right.
It's underlined though, so
Well, since you said that, I'm a little perplexed at why a retirement community would come up into a dwelling unit. It's a little, I don't know, why are we talking about a retirement community?
it's because it says dwelling unit.
Because it says
Dwelling unit.
dwelling unit.
The current definition of continuing care retirement communities uses the term dwelling unit. And I believe that's the confusion and the conflict that Tara is talking about. Is that right, Tara?
You have, yeah, well, yes or no, you have a definition. What's crossed out on the top of page 4? If you saw the red and blue, right? That's,
Crossed out in our handout.
That's, I don't know why we don't have the same information that you're looking at. But we don't have that crossed out section.
No.
That
Huh.
red.
It's not even here
Section.
to cross out.
So Tara, what you have in red and crossed out for that dwelling unit section, that does not appear in the handouts in front of us.
okay, I see why it would be confusing then. So, you have, I don't know how the rest of this conversation is gonna work then either, if you don't have it. So, dwelling unit, you have a definition in your zoning ordinance right now that says dwelling unit, continuing care retirement community, a dwelling unit with or without kitchen facilities located within a continuing care retirement community site, which provides the required continuing care retirement support services and facilities for seniors or disabled persons. You also have a definition for continuing care retirement community. So I'm not worried about taking this definition of dwelling unit away. I was just pointing out a conflict. You can throw the additional recommendations out. I mean, I just was trying to point out some errors in your ordinance while I was looking at it.
All right, I think I got it. So dwelling unit is defined differently in 2 spots in the same zoning regs, is what you're saying, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what you're saying.
That's,
We've had a habit of that over the years.
and she's recommending that we go down to one definition and keep it simple.
And I will agree with that completely, because those have haunted us, right, Jess?
Absolutely.
All right, now I think we understand what she's proposing. Is everybody on board with it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we're good, Tara.
Yeah, you're good, but if you don't have the red line and strikeout, this rest of the conversation is gonna be tough. Because I also marked up some similar changes to the continuing care retirement community section while I was at it, because the term dwelling units is just misused in a couple places. And
Well-
again, I was looking at that because that's how you start the examination of whether short-term rentals are already allowed or not, or if not, what needs to be added, is by looking at the definition of dwelling and how that term is used in the ordinance. We're trying to be consistent. So I'll tell you what I changed here in,
Oh,
I guess, let's talk about section 5. I don't even know what page yours is on now.
Can we stop on page 4 for a second?
I don't know what page 4 is anymore.
Okay, well, you
Right
had
there.
it, you have it up
Right
there.
there.
Okay, yeah, that's my page 4 for sure.
Yep, look at section
That's-
413, excuse me, for section 413.
Yep,
Um,
you're not there yet, though.
C, you're saying total density shall not exceed 1 dwelling unit per acre. That's the Lakeshore residential zone. The square footage requirement is 30,000 square feet in the Lakeshore residential zone. Why did we change it to 1 acre?
You didn't. In your special exceptions, the criteria says total density shall not exceed 1 dwelling unit per acre. But it talks about rooms in a bed and breakfast a lodging or guest house facility as if those are dwelling units. And I'm trying to correct that so that it's one dwelling unit, or if it's a bed and breakfast, lodging, or guest house facility, it's one cabin or bedroom per acre. That's only in the special exception criteria. We're not changing the minimum lot size. It helps if you have your zoning ordinance in front of you when we're talking about zoning amendments. Otherwise, you're shooting in the dark a little bit. But you would see that section 413 is only about special exceptions. To get a special exception in the Lakeshore residential zone, you need 10 acres.
Excuse me, Jess, could you put on the notes for Zach this 1 acre per cabin or whatever? Because I really feel that's not the intent of where that was headed with that.
Right, and there's
That zone.
another one in that section as well that we should address.
Okay,
I'm just gonna put section 413.
okay. Thank you.
So what would be this language, the language that's in there right now says a dwelling unit is defined as a single cabin or bedroom in a bed and breakfast, lodging, or guest house facility. But that's taken dwelling unit that's used one way in the ordinance and all of a sudden using it to mean something entirely different.
Right.
So we would get rid of that sentence and clarify that what we really meant was one cabin or one bedroom in a lodging facility.
There you go.
So that's what this is doing in 413. But we skipped over the similar change where dwelling unit is used incorrectly in section 331. Because in your current section 331-4B, you talk about an assisted living as having 10 dwelling units, and often an assisted living is a bunch of bedrooms all in one building with communal living room and kitchen. Those aren't dwelling units because they don't meet your definition of dwelling unit. You said a dwelling unit has to have its own kitchen.
How does this number 4, continuing care, fit into our short-term rental idea?
Again, we're trying to make it so we come out consistent and dwelling unit is used the same way throughout the ordinance.
Okay, but
We're trying to not
I
make
agree with that,
changes.
but I don't think it's part of our mission here is to straighten out the entire zoning ordinance.
Okay,
Deal
but
with
I'm not
short-term
gonna make,
rentals.
I'm not willing to make amendments for you that break another section of the ordinance. That's how you end up with these messes.
Understood.
Point them out is great, but we're spending an awful lot of time on stuff that is not part of the short-term rental.
Right, so
that we're on here.
maybe you just give it, pass it on to the zoning amendment committee, but
That's their job.
But I was asked to make.
And I think Justice made those notes. Thank you,
We'll
Jess.
pass that on to Zach.
Moving right along.
Number 6.
There is no page 5, but we have page number 6 here. How you?
Right.
It was number 6.
Yep, yeah, I got that.
On
Yep,
page 4.
yep,
On page 4, number 6.
yep.
And this is a list we've been working on as we've gone along that is not part of the zoning, but is going to be in your recommendations for things for the select board to consider after the zoning passes, if they adopt some regulations under their 4111C authority to have business permits.
So the room and meals tax number, that jumped out at me only because I have a VRBO and a couple things changed in the past year. State of New Hampshire now requires that Airbnb and VRBO collect the taxes and submit them to the state directly.
They do.
So if you're a VRBO owner, short-term rental owner, and you only get your reservations through Airbnb and VRBO, you don't need a room and tax number anymore.
So, but what other towns do whose regulations I've written that included this is they give the Airbnb or VRBO rooms and meals tax number.
So a
And they,
number from
and
the
they
town, like a
specify
permit.
that that's it.
So it's a permit number given by the town, not rooms and meals tax from the.
No,
state.
it isn't. if what this is doing, if you are signed up with Airbnb and you tell the town when you apply for your permit, you're only gonna rent it through Airbnb, so you don't need your own rooms and meals tax number, and then they see you on another site, something fishy's going on.
Right, something's amiss. Actually, I called DRA today and they said, they actually suggested keep it open in case you have that one-off. And it's kind of a pain for the VRBO owner because every single month you gotta go in there and say, I made zero money, so I owe you zero tax. I swear to God, send it. So just a painful thing, but it's the price of doing business, I
Right,
suppose.
but what you want to do, if you're with Airbnb, you're gonna provide the rooms and meals tax ID number that's theirs on your application.
No, Airbnb and VRBO will not give you their tax ID number is what DRA told me today.
That's not, okay, that's not, I've seen it working, but
Okay, I talked to Kim at 3:38 PM. And DRA tax assistant, she said they couldn't get the number from VBRO or Airbnb.
for your own property.
I'm confused. I don't understand.
But it's his
Said for your
property,
own-
but
for
that's
your
their
own.
business.
And the reason is that because they're paying the tax.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the homeowner.
Right.
Because they're paying that tax.
Right.
Because they're withholding that. So they're
They
keeping the
only
number.
have one number,
Right,
many.
Right.
Airbnbs, and not just yours, but
Exactly.
his and his.
but they won't give it to me, so I can't
Because
meet the
it's
requirement.
someone else's.
Right.
I think
So in
people-
that
I'm not
case,
muddying the waters. I'm just trying to say we want to be really clear on what our expectations
Right.
are here.
And this is just a list. This isn't the language for the regulations. This is just a list of things that you want the select board to consider
Mhm.
because of concerns that have come up.
But do you have an account number with Airbnb?
I do.
Can't
So-
that be used?
Short
Oh,
from,
I'm sorry. I didn't follow through. I have a meals and tax number with the state that I'm going to maintain and just file zero revenue every single month. So
and that's what they need.
right. But some people have been told, when DRI first came out with this new policy, say, hey, great news. We're gonna collect it for you and give it to you. And excuse me, VRBO said, great news, the state's gonna collect it and take it. You don't have to do anything. The state said, okay, you can close your license. You don't need it anymore. So if people did that, then there could be a challenge, but they can just get it again.
Get it again. Yep. Other than that, I think everything else on this looks good, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's all stuff that we touched on before.
Yep. We've talked about all of these.
They all make sense. The challenge I always have is how it's gonna get implemented and how it's gonna be enforced.
Well, people apply for a permit. So, Jessica, when does this need to get handed off to the zoning amendment committee?
Well, currently I'm waiting for a few ZAC members to get back to me as to whether we're gonna meet on the 9th or the 11th of August. And I mean, from there, we're just gonna start discussing, sort of the information that's been gathered over the last year or so. I guess, sooner the better.
Okay, but it sounds like, does this group want to see this again after John has looked at the criteria, or can his input go in it and then it goes on to Zach? Because that's, I think, the only thing hanging out there.
What should go on it, and then that goes on to Zach. And he's
I think
in
so.
Zach anyway.
So Scott, did you hear what Tara just asked?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
So so the input that I'm gonna get from John
Yep.
on these items. So the question was, does the committee want to look at it again after John has input, or does John's input just go directly to Zach?
I would think we would look at it.
I would think we'd look at it.
one more time.
Want to look at it one more time?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, before we leave the whole topic, can you look at the definition of short-term rental on page page 2, sorry. And see if you think it already is clear that it could be the accessory dwelling unit, or do we need to do something different with it? I'm not sure looking at it.
Well, since we decided that you can rent out an accessory dwelling unit, is there any reason to mention it there, that with or without an accessory dwelling unit, does that matter? Beforehand, we said,
I'm not sure it's clear yet that it can be the accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
think it needs a little bit more language to make that clear.
What if we said, a single family dwelling with or without an accessory dwelling unit offered for transit use for compensation and where the. Yeah, no, it's not gonna work. Well, maybe Jessica and I will brainstorm on this between meetings if we're meeting again. Because my brain's not doing it right now.
Do that.
All right, good.
And when it says they're not associated with regular commercial activities, such as a hotel, motel, lodging area. So we're saying a hotel and a motel can't advertise on Airbnb?
We didn't say anything about where they can advertise. A short-term rental is a single family dwelling.
I didn't get advertising out of that.
And the reason that I showed you proposed changes to the definition of those things is because they used the word dwelling unit when they shouldn't. And that was gonna make the whole thing go in a circle. That's why we were talking about other things that use the word dwelling unit. So we can be done with this, I think, and go on to open space subdivisions.
actually, I have one last question, back over to item 6, maximum 2 guests per approved bedroom plus 2 additional guests per dwelling unit. I believe we discussed this last time,
Yes.
but I see a lot of the classic camps, they'll have bunk, inside the house, not a bunkhouse, but they will have 2 bunk beds in a single bedroom for the kids. We're saying no go for that as far as head count, or is that counted under the 2 additional guests? I'm always thinking implementation and
Well,
enforcement. How
that's
do we do
a
that?
good question.
I think that's included to the 2 additional,
That's how it's covering it?
I
Okay.
think that's how it's covering.
But
I-
that
and
takes
that's
out
my-
the pull-out couch.
Yeah, the couch, the sofa, the hammock. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what the classic camps do.
Maximum
The
2.
reason for this is septic systems are designed as if there were 2 people in a bedroom.
Okay.
And the bottom line, if people are good doobies, they're gonna be under the radar.
Right, exactly. It's the house that has 20 people in it that,
You know,
Be a good doobie.
and signage say, we're on septic systems here. Just a little sign, some people be really all over that to say, hey, well, if it's yellow, let it mellow type of idea,
That's correct.
because growing up on the lake in a septic system, that's how we did it.
That's how you have to do it.
so the question came up somewhere along the way of whether the select board could notify abutters as part of their
Yes.
Biz 4111C regulation, and Steve Buckley said he did not feel they could.
Steve Buckley.
Who?
The attorney representing towns at New Hampshire Municipal
Oh,
Association.
okay.
Oh.
Didn't know who Steve Buckley was.
Sorry. I just assume everybody does,
But
but
what did the attorney say again?
he didn't think that the select board could require notifying abutters, like, because it's just not, it's not stated in the RSA's like it is with planning board activity.
That would have to be under the committee as far as the zoning board.
But therefore, we could.
No, you're not
increase it above the
requiring-
State reg.
Say that again?
We can increase it above the state reg. The state reg's minimum.
Yeah, that's what I expected him to say, but he didn't, and I'm just passing along what he said.
All right.
Okay, well, we can ignore lawyers.
Your town attorney might say something different. I had agreed to ask him and I did. Who's your town council right now?
No, Sessler,
Sessler.
he's gone.
No,
think of his name
it's
right
Stephen
now.
Whitley.
That's
He's
it.
from Drummond and Woodsman.
Woodman.
Woodman.
Yeah, I've worked with him somewhere. I can't remember where right now.
He's in Manchester.
Oh,
I
nice.
can't remember. He was with representing another planning board I worked with, but I can't remember which one, so. Okay. So yeah, he's the person to ask that when the time comes. you always want to get the final word from your own town attorney if you
Right.
want to try something.
Usually.
'Cause that's who's gonna defend it for you.
Okay, we hammered that, haven't we? Should
I
we?
think
talk-
so.
Huh?
I think so.
Yeah, let's talk about the, the conservation.
Yeah, so for the open space subdivision, I put together a little background for myself. I didn't do it in time to send it out or have Jessica copy it, but it just, and I don't know who could see the screen or not, but I just kind of go through how I organize my own thoughts to start the discussion on open space subdivisions. I looked at your minimum lot sizes and density that you have right now, just looking at single family homes. You have the Lakeshore residential zone that it's 30,000 square feet. You have the residential commercial that it's pretty small, 15,000 square feet on water, 30 if not. The residential zone's pretty small too, half an acre with water, an acre without. When you get to the residential rural zone and the rural zone, now the minimum lot size excludes steep slopes, wetlands on the roadways. And also says you can only have one single family dwelling per lot. That's on 1 acre in the residential rural zone or 2 acres in the rural zone. So these are the only places that really talk about density for single family dwellings. The other districts are actually silent on how many you could have on a lot, but you have the density, you need a bigger lot if you had more dwellings. But so I think if you're looking at open space subdivisions of some kind, you're really only looking at these two districts for starters. Because these are the ones that you have said you can only have one single family dwelling per lot, and you can't count steep slopes or wetlands.
But last year, we also had a conversation here on this board about smaller lots to put the lot on house on itself, still to have the remaining acreage for that unit in green space.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. I mean, that's the whole thing we're talking about. I was trying to look at what do you already have that would kind of guide our thinking on that. Like right now, you only allow a second home on a lot if you have 45 acres, and that's kind of bizarre. But then you have this inclusionary housing section.
That was the petition article, just so you'll know. That's why it's bizarre.
So you have the inclusionary housing section, and let's kind of look at what that does as a starting point. That also only looked at the rural and residential rural zones. It said the planning board can grant relief from the minimum lot size, density, and road frontage. And that is a little bit down in the list, but that those increased density and reduced dimensional requirements only apply to workforce housing units. So we have a subdivision plan has to guarantee a minimum of 20% and a maximum of 50% of the units are reserved as workforce housing. So interestingly, the kind of bonus you get, the relief you get from the zoning in a workforce housing development, you're only allowed to have 50% of the units be affordable if you want that relief. If you have all of the units affordable, you don't get the relief. That's a little bit hard to follow for me if I think we're trying to encourage affordable housing. Just those of you who have, worked me on the master plan committee, I'm straight to the point here of what I think. But I was really surprised to see that you put a limit on how much can be workforce housing in a workforce housing development.
Is this our?
This is yours, yeah. This is the,
Inclusionary zoning, that was the workforce housing ordinance.
so this is the key points from your inclusionary housing ordinance, that you only get the bonus if you if half of the project is market rate. So I'm guessing, oh, and the applicant has to inventory all workforce housing in Alton and document that the need for additional units is there. So I think what the thought has been with the master plan committee is to try to get rid of some of those restrictions, put flexibility into the zoning period, right? So that people can arrange the homes away from the wetland and steep areas. They can, maybe one of the things that we'll think about is whether you want, could density bonuses work for smaller homes? I know you talked about some kind of cottage developments. Would it be helpful to remove the restriction of one single family home per lot in those two districts, so that, because if you're gonna make smaller lots and you're gonna encourage smaller lots and smaller homes, people are gonna need to share wells, and they're going to need some kind of homeowners association to do that. So I think it's a little bit meaningless to do this unless you allow more than one home per lot, so that you could have a 0 lot line development. And that's just kind of me looking at what you have in the zoning and these 3 recommendations from the master plan committee that I'll read for those that can't see that relate to this. One would be to enable the planning board to provide incentives for open space subdivisions where frontage and access are provided by subdivision roads. So I'm gonna interject some language here that I'm not reading, but the master plan committee was thinking that these, what we're not calling cluster subdivisions, would be limited to subdivision roads, so that there isn't a visual impact for people on public roads. If you're driving on the town road or the state highway, you don't see a concentrated development. It's set back from that, and the driveways are off of a private road. And then it says, when the proposed layout will result in conservation of a certain percentage of contiguous high, will result in the conservation of a certain percentage of contiguous high priority natural resource areas or agricultural, forest, or recreation land. Incentives available to the planning board might include reduced lot sizes, frontage, and setback. The second related recommendation from the master plan committee, and I'm being careful to say master plan committee because the planning board hasn't vetted the recommendations yet. The second one that the master plan committee is recommending to the planning board is to consider removing the restriction of one single family home per lot to allow 0 lot line condominium on open space subdivisions. And then the third is to consider density bonuses for housing developments with smaller homes more affordable to young families, singles, and retirees seeking to downsize. So what I'm looking for tonight is really just for you guys to discuss these concepts and give me some direction so I can come back with some ideas and maybe some language at the next meeting. And I just want to say some of this language, we talk about contiguous high priority natural resource areas. I have a subdivision on my desk, a proposed subdivision on my desk for another town with 41 homes that are basically on islands in a swamp. And the open space land is upland, and that town's zoning ordinance didn't give them any way to tell that developer that the homes had to be concentrated away from the wetland and on the upland. So these details matter in the ordinance. If you want it to achieve its goals, you need to not just add flexibility, but put some parameters around it. What makes somebody get the flexibility? Is it because they're protecting important natural resources? Is it because they're providing open space for use by the residents? Is it because they're making it more affordable? You want to make sure there's a trade-off. It's not just so that they can build less road for their, in this case, very expensive homes. You want there to be a public benefit or benefit to the future residents. So I'm not up to speed on what your past conversations were about what you meant by cottage developments that you were talking about earlier. That might be a starting point for your discussion, is what were you thinking about earlier when you were talking about that?
Right, so I think the cottage colony and the open space subdivision were two entirely different things, if I recall correctly. They were two different discussions.
Hmm.
So I think what we wanted to focus on was the open space subdivision ordinance first. I think cottage colony was that more vacation?
Yeah,
Yeah,
That
it
was
was
more
gonna
of like
be
a
a,
vacation idea?
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Places for people to come enjoy our area that can't afford $1 million home.
Okay, so that might be a different thought.
And Tara,
Or it might not
let me,
be.
hold on, before you go, I'll preface you our thinking on that cabin colony. We're thinking of it being open May through the end of October, close for a couple of months, open December 15th through March 15th. That way you can get the winter enthusiasts, and then close it again during mud season, and then reopen May 1st. We did that for the purpose being that there could not be any residencies maintained out of that. 6 months, it'll be a day shy of 6 months. So nobody can claim residency. We're not looking for these to be residences. We're looking them to be people that want to come and enjoy the area.
But it sounds from,
They work.
so Jessica, it sounds that that's not what you want me to work on, but you want me to work on the open space subdivision,
Right,
right.
and that's kind of what I've laid out here, I think.
Yep.
So what, I think this committee needs to give me some direction on what the goals might be, and what should I know before I come back with some
Well, I think we all-
incentive draft?
workforce housing has to be smaller homes so they can be affordable, because you can't put a 2,000 square foot home there and fit under the affordable housing, because it's just not going to work. So they have to be smaller homes. Therefore, I think the density could be tweaked somewhat. And Tara, you mentioned zero lot line, so that's something I don't think we've discussed.
No.
Is zero lot line, so that's another option on this.
Then now you're talking condominiums.
Yeah, they would be
Be
condominiums.
an association probably.
Well,
Either way,
most subdivisions anyway are gonna have
Right.
an association,
The association.
Yeah.
Anytime anything's shared.
right?
Yeah, if there's common land, right, that's correct.
And this would have common land capabilities.
Mhm.
What else? Of a few things I mentioned would people think?
right. So I think the idea of that was to not have to build as much road.
Right,
So that
exactly.
was that huge.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about that.
Yeah, because roads are ugly to build. They're
Yeah.
expensive.
Have the
Right.
houses together and then green space for
Yep.
them to
Green
enjoy.
space.
Yep.
Not as
Yep.
many roads,
So,
Right.
and make them affordable, so.
affordable.
For young
plenty of
families.
buffers.
Yep,
Well,
But
you're
do
not
you
gonna
wanna-
be able to have a
Well,
ton of buffers
you're
in
gonna
a
get more
clustered area.
on a
But
big lot
a big
anyway.
lot. Right.
Here's an example. 121 acres and a traditional development of 5 acre lots. The density is 0.17 units per acre. There's zero common space. There's a stream corridor, which is private. Conservation subdivision, you're only getting 21 lots on that traditional. In a conservation subdivision, you're getting 40 lots. Less road. Residential lot area is only 37 acres. Common open space is 70 acres.
So what are you referring to? Because most communities, open space subdivision, would be the same number of units either way.
No,
For the state, you still have to do the calculation for lot size.
So I didn't hear that.
The maximum, you got a 121 acre lot, you do your lot counts and it tells you you can get 40 lots. But your town regulations say in a traditional, you can only get 20.
Yeah, but most open space subdivision zoning is written so that either it's the same number either way, or you're offering a bonus because they're doing something you want them to do. They're making them affordable, or they're protecting wetlands.
Some towns require at least 50% being open space.
Yes. But I don't think a percentage, I mean, looking at this example I was talking about, they have more than 50% open space, but it's useless.
It's still open space,
Who cares?
whether it's wetlands or what. It's still common open space. What you're utilizing is all the upland. If you only have 50% of your land in upland, you're only going to get 10 lots conventional. Whereas you can get 20 or 30 lots in that open space, in that upland area.
So the reason we usually, so did you have a chance to look at the model that I sent out? The model lot size averaging ordinance?
We have.
So if you see where it talks about density, that's where we usually put some language in that your starting point to talk about is the number of lots that would be in a conventional subdivision. And then you might decide in your zoning ordinance to offer a bonus, a density bonus, so that by doing this open space subdivision, they're doing something you want. They're protecting wetlands, or they're providing, in this case, I wondered if just talking about smaller homes would be simpler than involving state definitions of affordability. As soon as you start talking about affordability, you've got, you know, all the HUD numbers in there of what's affordability, and you have to enforce that somehow. My thought is, and I think one thing the master plan committee is talking about, if they were just smaller homes, and more flexibility and more variety, then the prices would come down.
Yeah, I don't think we have to be a HUD quotation based situation here. Let's do our own thing. I mean, you know, if I don't think we care what they make. We do and don't, but we need to have affordable housing. I think that's the bottom line. I don't want to have everybody have to come in with a credit application, say, oh, we fit into this. I think that's a little too infringing, you know, and I says, but if we can have, you know, up to 1,000 square foot, I'm just saying a number, up to 1,000 square foot house.
You talked like 1,200 square feet.
1,200 square
As
feet.
max.
That's what we- Yeah,
Yeah,
as
as
max, a couple bedrooms, bathroom, you know, something that
Yep.
that would, right,
Fit the
it
bill.
would, it would attract people, young families to move into the
Right.
town and live, so we wouldn't have to go through a HUD process or anything like that.
Right.
And people
More
that wanted a
appealing.
bigger house would go somewhere else and go to another part of the town and buy a bigger house or bigger
Starter
property.
Retirement / houses.
Exactly.
Right, so,
Exactly.
yeah, starters and
starter
and
retirement.
downsizing,
Yes.
yeah. But I think we
Be more
threw out the number
appealing and more
1,000 to
affordable.
1,200 square feet.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
the original number we,
Yep.
That's funny. That's the number I wrote earlier when I was thinking about this.
Residential though, year round?
Yes, yes,
They'd
that's
be-
year-round
yeah,
residential.
year-round residential.
That's not the cabin colony.
Okay, this is different.
We're on this open space subdivision.
Okay, and
space.
are we also gonna say somewhere else that the open space subdivision does not allow short-term rental? Now that we're on a committee.
Well, this is, we're not talking about short-term rent. This is the alternative housing.
Right,
committee,
but
which is
he's
how we
saying
started.
these could fall into that capability of the
This is a whole new
short-term rental.
category.
Yeah, and that
It would be.
that would undermine completely what
We're
our
trying to do.
Right.
we're trying to achieve. Exactly.
Exactly.
It sounds like the intent of the auxiliary unit, which we argued with earlier, is now the current intent of this type of location. That's what we're saying right now. we're saying we don't want there to be a short-term rental situation in this colony. or
In this,
This is a different
yeah,
category.
Yes.
This category is looking more at affordable housing
we could,
for retirees and for.
we could easily say in the
first-time
ordinance that,
homebuyers.
you know, anybody that takes this option and you get these benefits, this will not be available to short-term rentals.
Forfeit that.
Exactly.
That you forfeit that.
That's
Right.
Because-
homeowners association.
I like
Because
the
that, someone will
idea-
go in there and build it
That
out,
would
blow it
make
out, and then it'd be a,
Yes, so I like the idea of trying to keep what we're establishing, and where you have a clause that says this is not short-term rental. And there also might be a clause that says you can't do an addition. You can't just go and buy it and then double the house size.
right,
Right.
right. Well, good point.
Well, this would also be a community.
It'd be a community, so.
Oh,
I
you
think
can-
you'd
now
be
you
able
can do
to
your
that
lot
anyway.
They'd have their own rules.
Right,
Exactly.
You do coverage. If you got a 30,000 square foot lot, you can only have 25% coverage. That takes away from adding on.
Well,
into
yeah,
the
we could
house.
change the lot coverage requirement. Well, and yeah, there's a lot to figure out whether these are gonna be condos, because then it's the mother lot versus an individual lot. So we've just got to figure out that before we can address what coverages could be.
Do you have, I couldn't find that you have coverage now. What do you have a lot coverage requirement?
Not on residential.
No,
No.
No,
no,
Or
it's just,
commercial.
as long as
Commercial.
it's, yeah.
Because I was thinking about that too, of thinking about it today, of does it make sense for it to be but you could have some, if you did just the lot coverage limit, somebody could put a huge house on a huge lot, and I think that's not where you're trying to go with
this isn't what we're going after,
Right.
Tara. I mean, we're going after a modest home
Yeah.
that someone starting out or ending up can use.
Right, so,
Wasn't the other question that
I'm
we
gonna
had
first
had to
one.
do with septic and whether we could do the community septic or?
I would think a community septic and
That-
community
And-
water
and
would
water
be
too,
the
yeah.
I
thing to
think that
do.
we had a question on
That would help
regarding
affordability.
septic.
it'd be cheaper.
Yes,
Yeah.
it would.
Yeah.
Shared.
But again, that
Yeah,
really
cost.
strengthens the association need.
Right,
Right.
right.
It also strengthens the less people in a home. You would have less people density with sharing septic and sharing water. Whereas in theory, if somebody then went and had 4 or 6 kids, they're gonna need to get a bigger house somewhere else.
You know, and you can discriminate, say, these small houses, there's only be a total occupancy of 4.
No, not really. I wouldn't go that route. I mean, I don't think it's legal, and I don't think you could enforce it if it was.
But you wouldn't give legal advice.
She's probably
Mm.
right.
Oh, that's why I preface it with, I don't think.
Okay.
I don't think it's, you know, that's.
Just being a
it's
small
just
house,
a-
just
Being a
Legal
small
ways
house
to
in
discriminate.
itself with only 2 bedrooms,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
Let's stack 14 in
being
there.
Anywhere from 1,000 square feet to 1,200 square feet determines that factor right there as to who can buy the home. And it's not a part of their ordinance, if you will.
Yep.
That they can't expand.
That goes back to this thing that I showed in Bridgeton, that the villages, that colony. And if you guys want to do it, the villages in Bridgeton, Maine is one of these little pod developments. There's 10 to a pod. There are some that are just, I bet this building's 16 by 25 or 30, you know, and then they have other 2-bedroom ones with a single garage and things of this nature, but they're all in pods of 10 in the subdivision, and there was,
Right.
you
They're
know,
like little villages.
little
Yeah,
villages.
so it's kind of-
Yep.
yeah.
Is that a senior development?
No, it's not. I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I don't think so, but I'll look at the sign when I go by next Saturday.
Because I thought I remembered seeing an ad for something like that in Bridgeton that was a senior development that when it was planned and when it was coming but not built yet.
Yeah, Tara, look in Bridgeton, Maine, you'll see that.
Yep.
It's a pretty impressive little project, I think.
Where is it?
In Bridgeton,
No, I know Bridgeton really well.
it's on Route 117, I believe it is.
Spent a lot of vacations in Bridgeton.
It's
So-
towards Denmark, Maine.
Yeah,
It's up
okay.
that way.
Oh, so down, okay.
Is it the cottages at Willett Brook? Is that what it was called?
No, I don't think so.
That's it. It's 55 plus.
Okay, okay, maybe it is.
So anyway, what else is important? This is a good conversation. I'm getting some good notes. What else is important about this in order for somebody to have this bonus of getting around some of the usual regulations? Is there anything else? Does the same,
Tara wrote that.
if we're still calling it open space subdivision, does something matter in terms of the wetlands and the natural resources, or are there two paths to get the bonus, or is the only path there's more smaller housing?
Here's an example in Sunapee region. Said the ordinance grants the planning board the authority to approve reduced lot sizes, frontage setbacks, and minimum dimensions to be determined by the board based on the character of the land, the soils, the traffic, safety, and other issues. The ordinance also authorizes planning board to approve a density bonus of up to 25% for subdivisions of 20 acres or more, where open space permanently protected by a conservation easement to the town or a conservation organization comprises at least 75% of the lot. So there now you're stuffing all those houses in 25% of that lot.
Yeah, I'm not really in support of such specifics because every piece of land's different.
And that's what this article states.
Yeah.
One size does not fit all.
Right. But my question was, when we talk about the open space subdivision, do you only want to, and we're going to have some things that people can relax these standards if they do, the up to 1,200 square foot home is going to be one path. Is there another path where it's to protect certain natural resources or not? Are we calling it open space when we really don't care about the open space part? And if so, why aren't we calling it something more like flexible zoning?
That's a good question.
If we go back to the master plan recommendations, that there were two different thoughts that could both be combined in this ordinance. And one was smaller homes and another was a way to encourage people to concentrate development away from the important resources. Because you don't have a way to do that right now. If someone right now develops a nice piece of agricultural land or is right in a view, your ordinance right now is requiring them to have one home per 2 acres and to spread the development out all over the thing.
You're right.
Back to your language in there, in the rural zone, you limit one home to 2 acres. So if I want to put 10 homes on my whatever, if there's some wetlands, they've got to be interspersed with the wetlands rather than concentrated away from the wetland area. Your zoning, in other words, is working against some of the goals of the community, like protecting wetlands and steep slopes.
Right.
Because it's requiring things to be spread out all over the land.
New Durham is encouraging conservation subdivisions. I'm doing one right now, it's 100 acres, it's all road frontage, and they're against it. They want cluster subdivision. They're really pushing it.
I mean, you can encourage it with the density bonus. There's a couple of communities that require it as well, and in certain,
Push it like they are.
Conservation and cluster.
What's that?
What's the difference between conservation and?
Nothing. Name.
no, it's just that you guys said not to use the cluster word. That's what we're talking about in all these cases. Does any of you, were any of you involved about 10 years ago when a conservation subdivision or amendment failed at town meeting?
I was here and I'll tell you, we talked about one, and I'll tell you, I haven't seen this auditorium filled like that in a long time because wow, because this Agenda 21, they were all upset about that whole thing and
Well, and the other thing is the workforce housing was part of it as well. I mean, it was the whole.
right. And we had pricing at that point in time that we really met the workforce housing bill, you know, so, but now things have changed.
From looking at the notes on that, it looked like the conservation subdivision failed, and then the next year, the inclusionary housing, the workforce housing thing passed.
Sounds about right.
But what were people upset about in the whole point of the conservation subdivision and all of this is to give developers more flexibility.
They had it in their mindset, we were communists, basically putting it. Seriously, I'm serious when I say that.
I think when you see one year it failed and the next year it passed, was the whole idea, whereas we had to allow workforce, we had to make a zone.
We had to have a
We had
catch
to
for
make a
it.
zone for workforce housing. Otherwise you could put it anywhere.
That's like a Delta Entertainment. We had to have a spot for it.
Right. So that's why it passed, because we made a zone for it. So it looked like it passed, but it didn't
But
necessarily.
what is it that people could not like about conservation subdivision?
Workforce housing is section 8.
Yep, exactly.
No, but I'm talking about the conservation subdivision. Why didn't people want that?
He just told you, they thought it was Section 8 housing.
It was all lumped as all, it was all, I mean, conservation, it makes sense. But the
It's all how you
problem is,
market it.
they were all together
Yes,
with.
I see. So they misunderstood what was going on, or
they thought it had something to do with Agenda 21. and
yeah, they thought our regional plan did too. I remember that awful period of time when we had to have guards at public meetings.
That's why we always say, well, you gotta give it a different name.
That's right.
It's a great idea. It just has a bad name
Why
associated.
don't we call it flexible zoning?
What? I didn't
Oh,
hear.
say flexible what?
Zoning.
Flexible zoning.
That's what this says.
That's
It says flexible zoning.
Who could not like that?
Planning board, the flexibility to state what lot size, road frontage, setbacks can be.
Exactly.
Everyone is going to be different. Every subdivision is going to be different because you're going to look at the land, you're going to look at the soils, the wetlands and everything.
We're gonna put some parameters in it. We're not just gonna give them a blank slate.
one size don't fit all.
It's
That's what it says. One size.
It does not fit all.
right. But we're gonna put some parameters on it too. It's not just gonna be a blank slate. You guys need to decide how much of a density bonus you want to recommend. What's
I'm gonna say, let's think about that for the next time. Tara, if you give us some more bullet points, we should do, because I'd like to wrap this up in 15 minutes.
this is all I need to do from you tonight is just my starting point to try to write this for you. So I'll put in a placeholder for density bonus. But I didn't really get the answer to the question yet of, do I only get the density bonus if I'm building the small homes, or are there other circumstances where I might get it, like, because I'm shoving all the homes to the side of an important piece of farmland or view, for example?
I think it should be offered for more than just
I
the
agree.
small home. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're doing the same thing with bigger homes, then there should be something for it.
You know, the homes I've built over the years, one thing people have said to me a lot, there is no community when you have 200-foot frontages, you don't have a neighborhood for the kids to go play and things like this nature, you know? So I mean, then that's.
2 acres and
Yeah, that's
yeah,
partially right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, those of us that grew up in a different environment, I played in the street as a kid, you know, because that was where you played. You know,
I have rock all over my new parking lot.
All right, I'll try to come with an outline and questions in the outline to talk about next time, so.
that's what you said there.
Cluster subdivision, get a little cul-de-sac with 6 houses on it, you know, that's where the kids play, in the cul-de-sac.
Right.
Always.
Yep.
Yeah, street hockey, everything.
That's where the basketball hoop goes. Yep.
And those clusters, you know, cluster development back in the 60s and 70s. Oh my God, you mentioned that word, you were a bad guy. You know, look at Gunstock Acres there with the beach that they had down there. That was a huge cluster development thing. People were freaking out over it, you know?
Those subdivisions were done quick.
Or
before the
AKA
state subdivision
funnel
ordinance
development.
came in.
Did anybody look over the lot size averaging model? Any thoughts on whether that would be some use in that framework?
Well, it all depends whether you use common wells and common septics.
Right. Yeah,
That-
I think
that-
that's that determining factor.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, well, we would talk about that. I mean, that's
The thing
gonna,
about it is, even with one of those subdivisions, if you had on-site septic, you'd need your setbacks from your nitrate setbacks. And so you could have an issue on your hands trying to squeeze septic systems in a cul-de-sac situation with nitrate setbacks.
yeah, it's pretty common for these to have shared wells.
Yeah,
And then, and individual septic systems is probably one of the most common models.
well, having your own septic system is definitely a plus, because if you abuse yours, I'm not paying to fix it.
Right. And I mean, it's a cheaper way to go because a communal, you know, you have to go to like a packaged treatment plant otherwise. And then somebody's got to pay to maintain it.
And there are also some really nice new septic systems out that the water is pretty darn clean when it comes out of there. I mean, the one you mentioned earlier there for the aerated system there,
Right.
Solution.
Clean Solutions.
They're expensive,
But
but
even
there are some cheaper
Water
ones.
Industries has some stuff over there that's pretty good.
AJ Foss has one too, that's similar to Clean Solution,
Yeah.
but
His
half the
own,
cost.
yeah. Clean Solutions is just gross cost. I mean, $25,000. It's awful.
That's insane.
Yeah. First time I quoted one, I went, oh my word.
I'm sorry.
That doesn't include the maintenance package.
Right?
And that should be a cost that's coming down and encouraging people to utilize
Yep.
these systems.
Right, so I think I just need to know when to send you the outline.
Okay, when do we want to meet again?
I looked at, I think we're looking at, aren't we looking at the second and fourth Mondays as possibilities? That seemed to be where you guys and Jessica and I had some overlap in availability, so
Go 2 weeks?
if we did August 8th, then that sounds like you could hand it right off to the ZAC.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Jessica, on your end?
Yeah,
eighth.
I'm looking at the calendar.
The 8th works. Anyway.
And that's gonna be for a last look at the short-term rental stuff before it goes on to the ZAC, and the first look at flexible zoning. And it's just gonna be kind of an outline framework with some stuff for you to chew on.
Okay, so August 8th looks like a good date.
Because the selectmen meeting would be on the 1st.
Yep.
Of August. So we'd have the upstairs here on the 8th.
Do we want to block out the 8th and 22nd while we're at it? And then we'll already have it in our calendars for, I know it's, you're not gonna fall in love with my outline and fill in all the gaps in one meeting, we know.
We probably should because the calendar is gonna start getting super busy.
Was that-
Right, and now
Budget season.
I'm trying to speed it up to get it into the Zach's hands too.
What was the other date? 22nd?
Yes,
Yeah.
August
8th
22nd, another
and the
Monday.
22nd.
both Mondays.
I think those seem to be the dates that we all have in common available.
Same time.
Yep. Yep. Okay, thanks, Tara.
Thanks, Tara. Thank you.
Good, so see you in a couple weeks.
Yep, bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tara.
Good night.
Have a good evening.